For 2,000 years, the Holy Spirit has been doing amazing things to advance the kingdom and the church of Jesus Christ around the world and into our generation. And now, at the beginning of the 21st century, we have unprecedented opportunities and blessings. The question, of course, is, what now? What are we supposed to do next? And one of the most common answers is, we need leaders. We just need leaders. Well, technically, that's not quite the right answer, because lots of research has been done that says there are always leaders. If you want to test the theory, next time you're in an elevator, just turn off the power and see what happens. Somebody will become the leader. I'm not suggesting it, but we could just turn out the lights in here and somebody will become the leader. Or if you're in a small group, give the group $1 million in cash and somebody will step up and they'll be the leader and tell you what you should do with that money. So there are always leaders. But that doesn't mean that they're always good leaders. So how do we become the leaders that God wants us to be in the time, in the generation that He has given to us? So I'd like you to explore that with me tonight. I've got kind of a short list. 6 actions, items about becoming the leader that God calls us to be. And first on my list is kind of my definition of leadership. It's doing what needs to be done. That leadership is figuring out what needs to be done and then to do it. And the question is, for each of our churches, is what does your church need? What does your church need to do to fulfill the call of Jesus Christ? And sometimes the answers are relatively simple. The church needs more prayer. Not that all churches don't need more prayer, but particularly needs prayer. Or the church needs more money. Or the church needs more people. If we just had 10 more people, we'd have more prayer and we'd have $10,000 more. But there's some churches that what they need to do is they need 10 less people, especially if it's the right 10 people that they could get rid of. Because then the church can become all the church is supposed to be and all the church is supposed to do. I don't pretend it's an easy question to answer. It takes prayer and work and study and figuring out what does your church need to do to fulfill the call of Jesus Christ. As a young pastor in the Front Range of Colorado, the church where I was came up to an anniversary. And I planned an anniversary program for the church that was based upon 5-minute testimonials. That we have a ministry of music, we have a ministry to children, we have a ministry of missions, we have a ministry of Bible teaching, and we have people talk for about 5 minutes on each topic. And one of the topics was a ministry of evangelism. But I couldn't find anyone in the church who had come to faith in Jesus Christ in the previous 10 years, or anyone in the church who had led anyone to faith in Jesus Christ in the previous 10 years. So we took it off the program. But I knew, as a leader, what that church needed was evangelism. And I also knew that I don't have the gift of evangelism. I'm an introvert, I'm not good at this. I was a seminary graduate, I was an ordained minister, and I led one person in my life to faith in Jesus Christ. And it was a kid at camp who more or less forced himself on me. It wasn't even one I could get full credit for. And yet I knew that was what that church needed. I was impressed with Paul's words to Timothy, that he needed to do the work of an evangelist. I take it that Timothy was the pastor of the church in Ephesus, and he, like me, he did not have the gift of evangelism, but that's what the Ephesus church needed. So he needed to step up and do it. All right, so here's what I resolved to do. That I would go out every Tuesday and every Thursday night to homes in the community, a town of 18,000 people, and I would knock on the door of strangers, and I would ask if I could come in and talk with them, and I would present the gospel and invite them to become followers of Jesus. So I did it. Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, week after week after week, with no good results. often never got very far in a gospel presentation. And I was pretty much sick every Tuesday and Thursday. I had headaches and stomach aches, and I dreaded those days of the week, and just kept doing it. So one night I was in a home, this couple was there, Myron and Doris were their names, and they actually let me give this full gospel presentation. I got all the way through and I said, now does this make sense to you? And they said, yeah, it really does. Okay, I'm really embarrassed by what I'm going to say to you. I'd never gotten that far before, and I didn't remember what I was supposed to do next. And so I left. And I couldn't go out to the car and look it up. I didn't know what to do. And then I got home and I felt really guilty about that. So I called them up and asked if I could come back the next day. So I went back the next day and said, probably seemed a little strange the way I left. And they said, yeah, it really did. And I said, you said that this made sense. So what does that mean? If you were to tell God, what would you say? They didn't have the theological terms, but they basically said, we've done wrong stuff and only Jesus can fix it. And he died for us, and we need to believe in him and commit to him. And I said, these are totally unchurched people. I said, well, prayer is talking to God just the way you talk to me right now. So why don't you just go ahead and tell God what you just told me? And they prayed this amazing prayer. And they came to the church service the next Sunday. And after that, actually, they turned out to be pretty good evangelists. They actually went out on Tuesdays and Thursday nights and knocked on doors, and they did okay. And some more people were trained. And the church was transformed. It more than tripled in size through new believers. And I quit going out on Tuesdays. And you can only be sick so many Tuesdays and Thursdays. The other people could do it. They had the gift. But that's what effective leadership is. It's figuring out what needs to be done and then stepping up and doing it. But next on my list is that as leaders, we need to live Christianly. I find that sometimes leaders in churches, pastors and others, think, well, how can I lead the church? Because, my life is so busy, I can't get everything done. I don't feel well. I'm just tired. I'm just tired all the time. And my finances, I can barely make the minimum payment on my Visa card. And our daughter, we have a prodigal daughter, and I'm so ashamed of some of the things that she says and does. I can't lead the church. If only I could get my bills paid, and only if my daughter would turn around spiritually, and only if I felt better, then I could be the kind of leader that God wants me to be. Until we realize that we have a congregation full of people who are struggling to pay their bills, who don't feel well, who are tired, who have prodigal children that are breaking their hearts. And the very things that we sometimes think don't qualify us as leaders are the same things that enable us to be the best of leaders, because we are in a context where we can live out what it means to be a Christian in circumstances that we would never otherwise choose. So there are all kinds of examples. I'll tell you personally, one of the most dramatic moments in my life was as a recent seminary graduate. I was to be called to be the assistant pastor in a church that I'd served as a volunteer and part-time for a couple of years. And I was on the staff, and then the church had a business meeting on Wednesday nights once a month, which was about 12 times too often in the year. And totally without any notice that it was coming, they voted me out. They voted me out. I just never expected that. And then, kind of not knowing what was next in life, on the next Friday night, that was Wednesday night, on Friday night, I got a call from the chair of the church deacon board. And he said, Jack, the senior pastor of the church, he just got called out of town on an emergency, and we need somebody to preach on Sunday morning. And he said, you know, we've contacted the seminary and we've talked to missionaries that are back in the States, and nobody's available on such short notice. Honestly, he spoke what is one of the most memorable lines of my entire life. He said, "And we knew you'd be free." All right, so I agreed to do it. So I would come and I would preach the next Sunday. And just candidly, I'll tell you, there's some really interesting possible verses to use for a special occasion like this. My father, who was a pastor, said, you only have two things you need to do. Love the people, teach the Bible. Do that and you pretty much got it. So I don't remember what I said. It was too long ago. The church was too small. There was no recording. But as best I could, I stood there and I loved those people and I taught the Bible. I wish I could say that I've always lived Christianly in the face of difficult circumstances. But that day I did. That was in May. In July, the pastor of the church resigned and left and took a denominational post. And that congregation met on another Wednesday night and voted to call me as the senior pastor of the church. And I served there for 10 years. Leaders in difficult circumstances step up and show what it's like to be a Christian in that circumstance. I was preaching through the book of Acts, and I really like the book of Acts, but there's this story in there about Ananias and Sapphira and them dropping dead during the offering. It's just, I'm not criticizing God, but if the Bible needed to be shorter, that would be one of the stories that could be taken out. I mean, it's just a possibility. I'm just suggesting that. So when I was preaching on it, I just said, it's such a good book and such a strange story. And so I use an example, an illustration about an Ohio congressman named Trafficant. Some of you may remember the story, but he was convicted of a felony. He was expelled from the United States Congress. He was sent to a federal prison, and he gave a farewell speech on the floor of the House of Representatives, recorded in the congressional record, and it is filled with obscenities and profanity, and it was just a rant. So after he finished and he was taken off to prison, a reporter asked Alan Simpson, who was a senator from Wyoming, how do you explain that a member of Congress would speak like that and do that? And he had a really interesting answer. He said, 15% of the people in your community, your school, your business, or any other relationship you have are dysfunctional, strange, inappropriate, and out of control. So why would you expect the Congress of the United States to be any different? And then I said, and so if the church, 15, I said, look around you. 15% of the people you see, they're dysfunctional and strange and incompetent, and they're just out of control, and that's just the way it is, and that's the way it was with Ananias and Sapphira. So I thought that was a good example. And a week later, I was coming into a service, and an usher said, could I talk to you? I said, sure. He said, no, right now. And he pulled me aside and we sat down, and he said, I've been thinking a lot about what you said last week in your sermon, about how 15% of the people in the church are strange and out of control and incompetent and dysfunctional. He said, I think it's a lot more than that. Okay, so you're a leader of the church. Because you're here. You wouldn't be here if you weren't a leader in your church. And that's the reality, that even within the life of the church, there are circumstances that we would not choose. Live for Jesus Christ in the midst of that circumstance, and that is probably a whole lot more influential as a leader and a great deal more powerful than it would be if everything were just great and easy and fun. Third on my list for leaders is to choose multiple mentors. So I've got my own definition of who is a mentor. A mentor is someone you know so well that you could predict what that person would say and do in a circumstance that she or he has never been in. A mentor is someone you get to know so well that you could predict what she or he would say or do in a circumstance that person has never been in. Maybe you know the apocryphal story of medieval England and Camelot. You've seen the stage play, or maybe you've seen the movie. It's the story of the supposedly perfect kingdom in England where King Arthur draws the knights about a round table. There's an amazing equality to them. There's a fairness and a justice to everything. And the two people he loves most are Guinevere, the queen, and Lancelot, Sir Lancelot, from France, the best and strongest knight in all of the kingdom. And it seems as if everything is perfect. Until one day he finds out that the two people he most loves are involved in an illicit extramarital affair. And if you know the music or the story, it goes that King Arthur doesn't know what to do. He's in a terrible dilemma. On the one hand, he decides this is high treason against the crown of Camelot, they must be executed. But he can't do it. These are the people he loves more than anybody else. But he has to do it. He's the king. And so he goes out in the forest and he has a conversation with his mentor. And his mentor is Merlin the magician. And he asks Merlin what to do. And he gets the advice and the counsel that he needs as the king of Camelot. Except Merlin has been dead for years. So it was an imaginary conversation. But he knew Merlin so well that he could predict what Merlin would say and do in a situation that Merlin had never been in. Blessed are the church leaders who have multiple mentors, not just one. It's like a mutual fund. You don't want to invest totally in just one person. Multiple mentors. A mentor is someone who's like you. A mentor is someone who is in a circumstance like yours. A mentor is someone who you want to be like. A mentor is someone who agrees to meet with you regularly. A mentor may be someone who won't return your phone calls and won't answer your emails. A mentor is someone that may have been dead for 500 years and you simply read what that person wrote in the biographies that have been written about that person. But you get to know people so well that you're not out there alone. As a leader, you learn from those mentors. It is a powerful influence for effective church leadership. And not just for those who are lay leaders of churches and pastors of churches, but also for churches themselves. Sometimes I've been challenged by church leaders to say, all right, you talk about all this stuff, you write books and everything. What is the one thing that we should do that would make any difference? And my answer is go find 2 or 3 churches anywhere in America that 5 years ago faced what you face, and they've dealt with it, and they've moved beyond it, and God has blessed. And go and visit those churches and figure out how they did it. In other words, churches that have mentors as well. So leadership is doing what needs to be done, living Christianly, and having multiple mentors. Fourth on my list is to learn the leadership context. I have a friend who's a tennis pro, and he told me that one of the biggest mistakes that amateur tennis players make is they don't pay enough attention to whether the person on the other side of the net is right or left-handed. And that determines how the entire game is played, on whether you place the ball to the person's forearm or backhand.